I don't know when empathy became a dirty word, but without empathy, as human beings, we're doomed. We will destroy each other. Well, I was born in Scarborough, Ontario, to two immigrant parents in a very quintessentially immigrant, working class Canadian neighborhood. And I think that that does really shape you. You know, I had a very multicultural experience growing up here in Toronto. I traveled with my family because of my father's work. He was an artist and a shoe designer. And so we lived in South Africa for 6 years when I was a kid. We lived in Brazil for a year when I was a teenager. I did my last year of high school in between high school and university in the UK. So I was always a bit of a nomad. I was always interested in other people's experiences and their stories and their culture. When you grow up in Scarborough, you're not in a bubble. You're exposed to the vast array of life living at Finch and Victoria Park. Even as a kid, you know, when you would go for holidays and that kind of stuff, we were always in the middle of people's experiences of inequality. And I do think that that changes you. You know, you see that disparity. You see how it shapes people's lives. You see how it shapes their choices. And it's not to say that your future is predetermined by where you grow up, but it's hard to get out of that when you're born into it. My first experience in a war zone, I was 25. And I was recruited by UNICEF to work in war-torn Somalia because I was very interested and I was doing research. I'm a public health doctor, and I was just in my residency, and I was doing research around the intersection between women's health and violence, and how violence can actually shape a woman's health outcomes. And I worked in Somalia during the famine, and it was utterly devastating. I had spent time in different environments before, but never the scale of atrocity and suffering that I witnessed in Somalia. It was horrific. When you're young and you go to med school, and I was very young when I went into med school, and you come out and you're kind of confident, you know, you're kind of cocky, you think you have all the answers, you think you're trained, and you get on that plane to Somalia because you think you're going to save lives, right? I wasn't in Somalia 24 hours before I realized I wasn't going to be saving any lives. I'd be lucky if I was going to get out alive. There were bodies in the street. There were women waiting in lines at UNICEF-supported feeding clinic, waiting for their infants to be seen, and their infants were already dead in their arms. I mean, this kind of thing. It was also the rampant lawlessness and insecurity. You had to travel in UN vehicles with armed, what were called armed technicals, which is basically a euphemism for a teenage boy with a gun. And they were on the roof, 2 of them, and they were in the back, 2 of them, and they were usually beside you. I came back from Somalia feeling burnt out and overwhelmed about doing that kind of work again. You know, I had some very serious security incidents when I was in Somalia. Very lucky to have gotten out of some of those. And I thought, I am not equipped for this. I can't do this again. I can't face dead babies again. I can't do it. I can't do it. And then the UN contacted me again and asked me if I would do some additional work in Iraq and in Burundi during the genocide, and then in Liberia. And slowly, you come to this realization that while what's happening is horrific and wrong, there are things that you can do about it. And so then your brain moves from the question of why is this happening and how is it impacting on me, to what can we do differently, what can we do better, how can we help more people, and what are you going to do is what led to War Child Canada, because I had seen so many missed opportunities in terms of our aid response. I saw so many local people who were being excluded from the humanitarian response because it was all being staffed by foreigners just like me, you know, who were being paid much bigger salaries than those local staff were being paid. And I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it. There had to be a better model. And so that's why we started War Child Canada in 1999, with this specific focus on addressing the gaps in humanitarian action, which is why we focus on things like education, on food security, on preventing sexual and gender-based violence, and on economic opportunity, especially for women and young people, because for young people it keeps them out of the militia groups. Kids who've been out of school for many years can, through our programming, which is what we're well known for throughout the world, they can catch up on that programming and get back into at the appropriate grade level. And we built that entire model, which was really about community resilience, which is what you asked at the beginning, that put local people front and center in solving these issues and rebuilding their communities. And that's why 99.9% of our staff throughout the world are local, and we have over 1,000, to the countries in which we're operating, because they know better than anybody sitting in an office in downtown Toronto or London or Geneva or Rome or anywhere else. They tell us what they need and why they need it, and it's our job to make that happen. There's a lot that Canadians can do. There's this perception that aid is mismanaged, that somehow problems that take place in other parts of the world don't involve us and don't include us and don't need our engagement. And those are all misguided, because in fact, war is in everything that we do every single day, whether you're filling up your car, because we all know that oil is heavily involved in conflicts in the Middle East in particular, whether you're looking at your investment portfolio, including the Canadian Pension Plan, which has investments in arms manufacturers, and we all pay into CPP, and some of us receive CPP, whether you're looking at your cell phone that contains metals and minerals, including coltan and copper and tungsten and others that are actively mined in the Eastern Congo that are fueling the conflict there that has killed more than 5 million people since it started. There is war in everything that we touch and everything that we do every day. But look, being aware of it is one thing, talking about it is one thing, having an opinion on it is one thing, but the question always comes down to, well, what are you going to do about it? And so it's not enough to say, well, this is wrong and this is right. If you really want to affect change, you have to get involved. And getting involved can mean a number of different things. Whether it's War Child or a different organization, whichever one you support, actually donate to an international humanitarian organization. Less than 10% of donations in Canada, actually in the United States it's the same, go to support international humanitarian causes. So you can turn around and say, it's horrible that there's famine happening here, but unless you're actually donating, it doesn't matter if it's $5 a month, it makes a difference. And then donating on a regular basis makes an even bigger difference, because when you're, for example, a monthly donor, even if it's a smaller amount of money, it allows for stability and allows for proper planning for organizations, and it allows them to direct the funds where there are the most acute needs and gaps, which are often not the crises that are in the news. The worst crisis in the world right now, hands down, is the war in Sudan and Darfur, which has been a genocidal atrocity that has been taking place over the last 2 years on a scale that we have not seen, at least in recent memory. No matter how you grew up, if you grew up in Canada, the fact that you most nights fall asleep and you're not listening to the crackle of automatic gunfire, that you're not sending a child, you're not walking to school as a child and worried on a daily basis that you're going to be raped or abducted or shot, that you're not watching your siblings starve to death, that is an extraordinary privilege. And you don't realize how incredible that is until you see what happens when it doesn't exist. In a way, war, it liberates you from the things that you used to think were important. I'll enjoy a great outfit, but material things don't have the same power in my world. It's like if somebody says to me, hey, those are great pants, and I'll be like, hey, you want them? Like, it's just, which is a very common thing in the Middle East, right? If especially when you're in Iraq, and I'd say, that's a nice necklace, they'll take it off and give it to you. I mean, that's the hospitality. For me, I get a lot of joy out of seeing other people happy and joyful and feeling loved. I'm also really lucky because everybody in our organization is motivated to achieve the same thing. So it's not like I'm doing it in a vacuum. I'm doing it surrounded by amazing people who are driven to do the same thing and who are always like, yeah, let's do this, right? And so that's That's remarkably inspiring.